Mr. Speaker, there is no question that with over 300,000 jobs already lost in this country, that there is some despair out there in terms of, well, the budget should have addressed how can we make sure that we give a helping hand to people, how can we make sure that we are trying to invest in the right areas. But again, you know, even the, not only the Conference Board of Canada, but some conservative institutes out there indicated clearly that the government was simply throwing money, good money against bad, that they were not doing the kind of investments that needed to be done. C.D. Howe Institute, Fraser Institute, not exactly good friends on our side. I have to tell you, they took a very strong stand in terms of looking at where this money was going, and obviously we're disappointed. The fact is that infrastructure funding for non-profits, one of the things, we have 160,000 charities across Canada, employs over 2 million people, and the government made a big fanfare about trying to invest in these charitable organizations and saying, well, we're going to announce that people can, in a short period of time, and it was a year ago, August, Mr. Speaker, I think they had 10 days, which nonprofits were able to fill in a form. Now, in 10 days for nonprofits, that's a major task to begin with. But they only earmarked about $4 million. They had over 1,000 applicants plus across the country. And therefore, when people applied, they assumed, because of the big fanfare that the government announced, saying, you apply and we'll make sure that we can help you out. Well, I can tell you that certainly in my own riding, although we did get money after repeated writing and phoning of the minister's office on things like roads and park development, etc., in the non-profit area, it was a disaster. I can't think of the 6 that applied, not one of them got any money. And they got basically a curt email saying, too bad, so sad, you know, 1,000 applied, we only had 4 million, you're out of luck. Well, really, that's not really very appropriate, particularly when you're talking a sector where there's 2 million plus jobs out there. Again, those are the most vulnerable organizations. When they needed assistance from the government, they clearly didn't get it. And the Fraser Institute's recent analysis of Statistics Canada shows that the stimulus package was neither timely nor effective. And now, again, when you're talking about infrastructure money, I guess the only people who really made money were those who put up all those signs across the country, because obviously those who really needed it, you know, the government is great at announcing things. Particularly, they'll say, well, we're going to announce the following, and everyone assumes then that it's going to be rolled out, and it isn't there. The money is not in hand. If I had the time, Mr. Speaker, I'd speak about all of the defence procurement issues where the government has announced but are not being delivered. But going back, Mr. Speaker, particularly to the issues of small to medium-sized businesses, they were hit hard, certainly in Richmond Hill and in Southern York region in particular. And there's a crisis there. And the crisis is the need to have the kind of response from a government that is absolutely prepared to listen. And one of the ways, of course, is working much more collaboratively both with provincial and municipal authorities as well. Recommending certain tax breaks at this time was something that many businesses in my community asked for. They asked for those tax breaks in order to help both in terms of some capital write-offs for machinery. In other cases, it was simply because they're so overburdened at the present time with the drop in the economy, and those people obviously are not much more difficult in terms of being able to come out and spend the money that they need. They said, we need to have this kind of assistance. And again, we submitted a very detailed, I might point out, Mr. Speaker, report to the Minister of Finance indicating in these areas which I'm outlining to you today. Canada must continue to be competitive, and the only way it can be competitive is on the areas of innovation, in the areas of good tax policy, in the areas of making sure that young people have an opportunity, that there's retraining for those older workers who need it. And again, the government seems to have failed in all of those areas. And again, you know, what did they do for workers? Well, they brought in a $13 billion payroll tax hike, which will affect over 220,000 small businesses in Canada. And, you know, when I hear about EI from the other side, I would point out to the members over there that it was the Auditor General who said we could no longer have a standalone EI account. Because sometimes I hear from the other side that somehow there was this EI fund and it was rolled in by the previous Liberal government. In fact, it was the Auditor General who said you couldn't do that. Well, when you see a tax increase of $13 billion, that to me is a tax. I don't know what else you would call it. The government doesn't like to refer to it as a tax, but I can tell you the businesses in my community see it as a tax, and they see it as a regressive tax. A regressive tax hurting those businesses who often, with maybe 9, 10, 12 employees, if it's a decision of adding an employee or even maintaining what you have, and then you get hit by this, obviously it's not going to be very helpful in terms of any kind of expansion. There's over 1 million small businesses in Canada. 98% of these businesses, obviously, are looking for support. Not necessarily handouts, but obviously a hand up in terms of government policy. And yet the government, of course, is applauding itself and saying, well, you know, we're going to be able to get through all this. You know, we just grin and bear it. We're spending all this money. I'll be interested to see in the fall, Mr. Speaker, the Auditor General's report, and start really looking at those infrastructure projects that were announced and just where that money actually wound up, because I have no doubt, Mr. Speaker, that it's going to be quite a report and it's quite interesting for Canadians. The area of small business, certainly in this party, has been very strong, and back in February we held a forum on Parliament Hill dealing with small business. We heard from small business owners, and they clearly indicated that, again, the government had not been listening up until that point, and obviously it was reaffirmed with the budget on March the 4th.